part of... Sorry, my name is Khadija Lalawa. I do everything in relation to music when it comes to Afrochella, for curating the stage and the performances. And music is one of the major pillars of Afrochella, the festival. It goes from music, fashion, food, and everything that talks about our culture as Ghanaians and as Africans. And as part of trying to throw more spotlight on the music pillar of Afrochella, we decided to put together the Afrochella Music Museum. And we hope that by doing this, we continue to have conversations about our music as Ghanaians especially, but on a larger scale as Africans. Be able to educate more people, entertain more people, and also be able to appreciate all the work that the music industry has done, and with regards to all the stakeholders of the music industry. Our writer here, JOT Agyeman, was the one who put everything together and will take us through the journey. It's supposed to be able to tell us the journey of Ghanaian music from pre-colonial days till now. Thank you.
As Khadija said, my name is JOT Agyeman. As Khadija said, this is the Afrochella Music Museum, and it is the first in a number of things that Afrochella want to do with the museum. So what I'm going to do is to take you through what we have here, so that when you go around, you can better understand what it is. Let me start by saying that for most people, especially the new crop of musicians and the youth, most people don't really know where Ghanaian music started from. So we go back to pre-colonial time. If you understand the rituals that we have and our festivals that we had all of these before the white people came to colonize us. And that is really where our music started from. The very first instruments that came into Ghana, in the Gold Coast in those times, were brought by one of the Portuguese governors in 1470. So he introduced things like the piano, and then it was the British who came and then introduced what we call the orchestra. So all the other string instruments and all of those were introduced by the British. But let us understand that we had music before the white people came. Okay, so let's go. Said our own kind of musical instruments started with things like elephant tusks, where if you know the Asante culture, they have the elephant tusks that they blow, and so on and so forth. And it starts from 1470 when the Portuguese brought us the instruments. So we'll go to the beginning. In this particular room is the beginning of what today we know as Ghanaian music. Independence. We had, like I said earlier, European music instruments were introduced by the Portuguese government. Lopo Soares de Albuquerque, that was his name in Elmina in 1495. He brought instruments from Portugal for his own pleasure. So he taught some Ghanaians how to play those instruments in 1475, and they would play for them at that time at the Elmina Castle when it was first built in 1482. So that's how music started in our communities. And then from there, the British came with their own instruments in the 17th century, and the orchestra was formed. But it's important to note that the British were the people who introduced formal music into our schools and into our education. And that is how we started learning notes and all of that from the British. And one of the very first people to take what the British had done, the orchestra, was a secondary teacher called Teacher Yali. In 1918, he started what is today known as the concert party. Teacher Yali started that with the Empire Day Parade, and he would play and dress up like the concert party did. And that is the antecedent of concert party. It's a box kind of instrument which has a few keys on it, that strings on it that they play. And he's well known for one of the most famous Ghanaian musics of all time, Yam Bonsa. And his name is Kwame Asari Jacob Sam. And Yam Bonsa was actually put together in 1928 or thereabout. So it's almost 100 years since Yam Bonsa was played. We also have the famous King Bruce and the Black Beats. These were all before independence, and they had learned how to play from the colonial masters and had formed their own bands. So the Black Beats, for example, was formed in 1953. In 1952, about 53 is when they started doing their own main concerts and so on and so forth. So King Bruce is one of the most famous people before independence who started, and then obviously one of our most famous drummers, Guy Warren, popularly known as Ghana Ba. Ghana Ba was really the first Ghanaian export to the United States. He played a lot of his music, jazz music, in the US, and came to Ghana. And in 1960, when Ghana became a republic, he changed his name from Guy Warren to Ghana Ba. So there are other people who also took part, Jaguar Jokers, and you have Tommy Gripman and the Red Spots. These were pre-independent bands that we had in this country. The party was doing very, very well around that time because they were going from village to village, entertaining people. And it is interesting to note that Kwame Nkrumah used the concert party extensively to propagate his message when he became president of Ghana, and he funded the concert party to do just that. So we move into the Nkrumah years, which at that time, most of the musicians were called vagabonds. They were shunned. People thought that music was for school dropouts. But fortunately for them, Kwame Nkrumah realized the gift that they had, and in order to promote his Pan-African agenda, he decided that he would use music and use Ghanaian musicians to do that. So most of the bands at that time were paid by Nkrumah. The most famous people at that time were Jerry Hansen and the Ramblers Band. And for those of you who are old enough to understand Ramblers is still around. It is at the moment being headed by Jerry Hansen's son. And then you had E.T. Mensah and the Temples Band. And the Temples Band was a very famous band, but it had quite an interesting revolution of different people joining on and off. But E.T. founded that band, and that band was used extensively. The band played at the Ambassador Hotel during Ghana's independence and continued all through. And E.T. Mensah at that time was said to have been paid something like 2 cedis at that time by Kwame Nkrumah. Had to have anything to do with Nkrumah. So any band that had been on Nkrumah's payroll, they just shut. So most of these people suffered a lot during that period, between the 1966 and 1969 time. They had to go around the country themselves, and they had to find money for themselves. And don't forget that at that time, it was a very difficult period, and nobody was interested in their kind of music. So music took a dip around that time, but somehow they survived. And so after the post-Nkrumah time, we've got people like C.K. Man, Konimo, Nana Kwame, they started coming up around the post-Nkrumah time. And then they went into the military years. So we went through a period of military rule from 1966, and then we went through to 1979, 1981. So it's quite a very tough period for musicians at that time. After the Rawlings years, it killed the nightclubs, it killed all of those things. So again, a lot of people at that time decided that it was time to run away. So most musicians between 79 and 1981 left Ghana to go abroad. Those who stayed are people like Nana Kwame Bedu, Senior Eddie Donko, Rama Bedu, and the rest. They stayed, and they didn't want to leave. And we are grateful that they stayed, because if they had left, high life would be dead. Travel away because of the difficulties they had during the revolution time. Most of them ended in a place called Germany, in an area called Hamburg. And that's why we have the term Bogger. When they arrived from Hamburg to Accra, we call them Hamburgers. Okay, and that is how the name Bogger came. However, most of these people in Germany, because they were musicians, started working with people like Bodo Steiger in Germany and created a new brand of high life called Burger High Life. So you had proponents of those Burger High Life at that time, people like John Darkon, people like Daddy Lumba, people like Felix Jamfi, you had people like Mark Brown, Ben Bracken. They were the people who were in Germany, and in fact Ben Bracken moved to London in the 90s also, so he was kind of in between the two. But the others like Charles Amoa and the rest were the people who started. So even though they started Burger High Life in Germany with Bodo Steiger and Bob Fisher and all of those people, it was George Darko who came to Ghana at that time with the famous Lidodo and brought us Equity Rofo, the first authentic Burger High Life that was played in Ghana and understood Burger High Life. So this is where most of them can fall in. So you have, he did not play Burger High Life. He decided to play what we call Lovers High Life. So he was more interested in the love songs, the songs that will bring people together, relationships, and so on and so forth. And he is one person that is regarded by most international music producers as a Ghanaian genius in music, because at that time his music brought people together. So that really is about Burger High Life. As you go around, you find quite a lot of them around. Then something interesting happened after Burger High Life. We had a period of freedom. 1992 came around. Between 19 and 92, there was call for independence. Not independence, a change in democracy. So you had a period when musicians had the freedom to talk about music and to express themselves. At that time, a very young man called Reginald Osei Jr. was in the United Kingdom. His father was a famous fashion designer called Saint Osei, and he was with a band in the United Kingdom, and he had started experimenting with hip hop in the United Kingdom. He came into Ghana at a time when already people like Jedu Bleambule and the rest had tried rap and were noted for their rap songs. And not only that, but Reggie decided that he will take what others had done and make it into a more authentic genre. So hip life was born. And he's touted as being the grandpapa of hip life. However, music history does not place him as the originator of hip life. Even though his accolades include being grandpapa, that title goes to Jedu Bleambule.
Very controversial.
Headline. Headline.
Okay. So it is interesting that in the 90s, because of what Reggie Ayton hip life, which he called hip life and named it as hip life. Now let me explain here. Reggie started hip life, but he did not start the genre. That's why I said that Jedu Bleambule started for that. There were other people who were coming up and who found what Reggie did as very interesting. So Reggie is really the bridge between the Burger High Life period and the new period of hip life. And at that time, what he did was interesting to a lot of young people because it had never been done on the Ghanaian stage. So people like Hammer of the Last Two, Zap Mallet, they decided to work with a lot of these young people. Zap was working with Lord Kenya at that time, but it was Hammer who took a young man by the name of Raffo and turned him into a superstar by releasing the Paimuka album at that time, which became a sensation. And so Hammer is credited as being not only as being the one who pushed hip life further and gave it more of a sort of a gravitas for people to understand further. So let's not forget people like Terrible Chaka at that time, who also started playing. Unfortunately, his life was cut short at the University of Ghana after a concert. At that time also you had people like Abrewa Nana, who as a woman had also taken up hip life. And then later on, a few years after Abrewa Nana came, the very famous Miss Bell. It came around the mid 1990s, and their music should actually be in collectives, but as a group, they also introduced that kind of what do you call it? Brought some flair to what it is. So other people started realizing that we could also form groups, and so other groups started coming up after Agyeman and what he did. Now let me say that as we transcend hip life, you move into the eras of people like Sarkodie, Edem, Kwakese, all of those people belong to that hip life generation. The reason why this is here is to put those who have become quite relevant in the space today and who have become proponents of Afrobeat. Okay, Afrobeat is a genre that is a combination of several things. The original Afrobeat king is Fela Kuti, and what most people like Kwame Legion and Kidi and the rest have done with Links is that they've taken beats from a lot of these African musicians and have fused it with high life, and they've created a quite unique kind of high life. So I like to tell people that I don't know if they are playing high life, but it is some form of high life, but it is indeed Afrobeat. And Kwame Eugene, Kidi, Adina, King Promise, they are operating in that space today. Okay. Our most famous exports, I should say, when it comes to 2 Grammy awards, and we hope that he wins this one this time. And it will be the first time Ghana would win a Grammy. But it's so relevant because in all the years of Ghana, we've never been nominated for a Grammy. And for him to have 2 is very significant in the history of Ghanaian music. Also, people like Samini. Samini is very significant because, in the opinion of many, he birthed people like Shatawale and Stonebwoy, and it was through his music that these people came to bear. But they are now bona fide superstars in their own right. These are people who have also taken Ghanaian music and have turned it around. So we call it alternative music. They don't play high life, they don't play Afrobeat, but they kind of mix genres all the time. Every time they are doing something different with their music. And a lot of them, including Kinayosuba, has taken traditional music and made it mainstream. He's not the only one. You have people like Sharif Aguno, you have people like Wiala. They've all taken traditional and made it mainstream. People like Panjianov, the sound producer, has also brought quite a lot of musicians within that space. He has worked a lot with Kinayosuba, and as a sound engineer, Panji is very relevant in opening that alternative music space. People like Manifest, people don't believe that what Manifest does is hip life. They think it's alternative music. But I think Manifest is significant because I think his lyrics is probably one of the best that we have in this country. He's so relevant in terms of what he says that you cannot put Manifest out of the picture. So all the others you see are all those in the area of alternative music. You have people like Ifia, that widely known, Amare, Wiala, Jackie, Black Sheriff, Yatog, Lamenga. These are all within that alternative space. So you cannot put a finger on the kind of music they do because they are still experimenting with what they do. And every time they try something new. And I think it's fresh, it's good for us because it doesn't limit us to